It's one of the largest corruption scandals ever to engulf Southeast Asian politics. International investigators say top Malaysian officials siphoned money off the country's sovereign wealth fund, the One Malaysia Development Berhad, known as 1MDB. Instead of being used for development work, those funds were allegedly spent on lavish properties and entertainment companies, as well as gifts given to celebrities like actor Leonardo DiCaprio. Now the US Attorney General has weighed in.
Officials allegedly laundered more than $4.5 billion in funds through a complex series of opaque transactions and fraudulent shell companies with bank accounts in countries ranging from Switzerland to Singapore, Luxembourg, and the United States. This is kleptocracy at its worst.
The man named at the center of the scheme is the current Malaysian Prime Minister, Najib Razak. He's denied any wrongdoing. But the scandal has enraged ordinary Malaysians and ignited movements to hold those responsible to account. Like this one by local NGO Bersih.
We have planted the seed where people actually start to ask, what is MDB scandal all about? Why is it that we are questioning the Prime Minister having 2.6 billion ringgit in his personal account and doesn't need to even account for it?
Najib's government has responded by arresting activists like Abdullah and also cracking down on domestic press coverage of the issue. It also dismissed Malaysian officials investigating the allegations and has recently declared that all charges against the Prime Minister are unfounded. But that's only lent more impetus to the campaign, and it's been strengthened after the country's longest-serving Prime Minister and Najib Razak's former mentor joined in the call for him to step down.
Kalaupun kerajaan tangkap orang itu ini apa semua, dia tidak akan menjejaskan semangat rakyat untuk membuang Najib Tun Razak kerana dia mencuri duit.
Muhammad says he's willing to join forces with the party of another former protege, Anwar Ibrahim. As the pressure intensifies, Najib Razak is expected to call snap elections any week now. So will the waves from this corruption scandal be big enough to sweep the ruling party from power? Shoaib Hassan, the Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Singapore is O.I. Sun. He's the former political secretary to Prime Minister Najib Razak. In Kuala Lumpur, we have Mukhriz Mahathir. He's a leader in the opposition coalition and the son of former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad. And also in Malaysia's capital is Rafizi Ramli. He's an opposition MP with Anwar Ibrahim's People Justice Party and the co-founder of the whistleblowing organization. Now, gentlemen, I'm going to begin by asking you all the same simple question. I'll start with you, O.I. Sun. Is Malaysia's State Development Fund corrupt?
Well, I think internationally there have been a lot of investigations into the goings of these various funds, and I think various jurisdictions have reached conclusions, namely positively in their opinion. There are certainly things which are not quite according to the normal rules in terms of transfers of funds and various matters. Within Malaysia, however, I think we have the Attorney General's chambers insisting that no criminal matters have been unearthed. And unfortunately, we do live in a system whereby the sovereignty of nations are respected, and as such, you could hardly do anything in Malaysia.
Okay, so we're going to come back to the question of sovereignty and what the Americans and the Justice Department are doing in a moment or two, but let me go to Mukhriz. Mukhriz, is 1MDB, that sovereign fund, is it corrupt?
Very clearly so, because we've never seen anything of such scale. Mr. O just now mentioned that the Attorney General had cleared 1MDB of any wrongdoing, but at the same time, the Attorney General himself was appointed by the Prime Minister after the previous one was supposedly fallen ill, which the person in fact denies. So there seems to be something definitely that's afoot.
Rafizi, is it corrupt?
Absolutely. We have had bankers who were convicted in Singapore We have cases ongoing in different jurisdictions in the United States, in Switzerland, and even in Malaysia, as much as Premiers Najib have full control of the state apparatus. But everyone understands that we are taking an economic hit because of the massive bailout of the unaccounted funds, because of the corruption that happens around 1MDB funds.
Okay,
so
but
it's absolutely...
Certainly. Okay, so Rafizi, when the Anti-Corruption Commission carries out these high-profile arrests of people they allege are corrupt, isn't that a good thing? Doesn't it show that they're doing something about it?
Well, I think that's very much just trying to go for the small fishes, for the small criminals, just to build up some confidence that they are doing something. But as far as the public is concerned, the biggest elephant in the room is 1MDB that involves the Prime Minister. Unless and until something is taken, some actions and some explanation, it's not going to work.
Okay. Mukhriz, Najib says this is political sabotage. Quote, political sabotage from your party, from your father, former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad. What do you say to that?
Well, there's absolutely no basis to that accusation. Who would have been able to fix such a scheme from setting up a so-called sovereign fund with only R1 million of capital, borrowing, ratcheting up a borrowing of up to 42 billion ringgit, and then the PAC, the Public Accounts Committee of the Parliament, finding that quite a sizable chunk of that borrowings have gone missing. So how this could have involved my father, who had retired for the past, 14 years now, is bizarre, to say the least.
Right. OI Sun, the Department of Justice alleges that billions were misappropriated from 1MDB. The Wall Street Journal has a paper trail, they say, that says about $700 million from the fund are connected to Prime Minister Najib's personal bank accounts. Do you think that they might be onto something legitimate here, that they might have a case?
Well, I think nobody seriously, except for perhaps the ruling party, is doubting the veracity of these various accusations. But I think the whole point is it wouldn't make a lot of political inroads as to the Malaysian political scene, because those people who do, shall we say, have confidence in such allegations, they are mostly the more educated urban elites. And these urban elites, in any case, are staunch supporters of the opposition. So you can't make much political inroads, because in the rural areas, this sort of allegations, while they may or may not be believed, people care more about their daily livelihoods. And whether we like it or not, the ruling party is in a better position to deliver those livelihood needs, and thereby they will still enjoy sizable support. And that, unfortunately, is the fact of the life.
And that's interesting political analysis, but I want to see if I understand you correctly. You're saying that it might be true that they're stealing hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars, but it doesn't mean anything politically back home because poor people only care about what they eat. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah, because we have a very wide gap in terms of our wealth distribution. For the more unfortunate lot, which happens to be the majority of Malaysians, of course you would need to improve your livelihoods. Unfortunately, our political system is set up in such a way that the ruling party is in a better position to deliver those needs, albeit only for a short-term or medium-term basis. Okay. So people will be induced to support the political elites, whether or not such allegation is true.
Okay, so Rafizi, that's fascinating, right? You guys are campaigning against corruption. You're trying to use this for political leverage. Guess what? OI Sun says it doesn't matter because you're not going to dent the political capital that the ruling party has come next elections because it doesn't matter to the average voter.
Well, I think that's the kind of mistake that Najib is going to make as well, thinking that the average folk does not care or does not understand. Well, you know what? There's a big difference now between the previous corruption scandals in the country because it coincided with very sluggish economic situation, especially for the middle class and working class, so much so that people are really suffering from stagnated wages, from inflation, and people can attribute a lot of changes under Premier Najib as far as the abolishment of subsidy, the failure to control inflation. All these are attributed to 1MDB because state funds had to be used to cover up for the financial burden. So while they might not talk too much in the context of 1MDB, the financial scandal, they understand the money that has been siphoned away does have an impact on their livelihood. And I think they will show it at the ballot box.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see when that election actually happens, which one of you is right. Mukhriz, let me ask you about what's going on in the US. So on the one hand, you have the Department of Justice, Jeff Sessions, going after the Malaysians, using very colorful terminology as well. And we're talking about billions of dollars, and the DOJ seems to be extremely confident. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump saying, hey, Mr. Prime Minister, welcome. Thank you for the investments, and having a photo op with him. Does it twist your insides when that happens?
Oh my gosh, I think the whole country is, they just can't accept this situation that we're in at the moment when we have one part of the US government represented by the DOJ, Jeff Sessions being the Attorney General, being very clear in explaining what's happened with 1MDB, the amounts of money that has been siphoned out into the US market, buying all this property and such. And at the same time, the Malaysian government actually saying that this is not from 1MDB, therefore, even if the Attorney General obtains these monies, Malaysia should not be accepting it because they claim it's not ours. It's really bizarre. And what is even more baffling is Najib's offer to Donald Trump that he would use the pension fund, which is our hard-earned money actually, to invest in infrastructure projects in the US, amounting to tens of billions of dollars. So it's really quite surreal, actually, if I should say. And none of us can accept this.
Son, does the fact that the US president seems to have Najib Razak's back mean that he's in the clear here no matter what happens with the DOJ?
I think Najib Razak is not only in the clear of the current US president, I think he's in the clear of the US rival, namely China, and various other parties around the world. You see, the fact of the life is diplomacy. It's sometimes very contradictory when it comes to being compared to domestic politics. Domestically, there are a lot of opposition to Mr. Najib, granted. Internationally, he has positioned himself successfully, at least to the US and to the West, as somebody who is moderately Muslim and, been held up as a role model for a lot of failed states to emulate. On the other hand, in terms of China, for example, he's, welcoming a lot of Chinese investments, and the Chinese are, of course, very happy about that. So he has put himself in a very enviable position of being well-liked by both the US and China, and that is not easy to achieve.
Right. Rafizi, last year Time magazine listed Malaysia the second most corrupt nation in the world after North Korea. Now, after everything we've spoken about, you would accept that that was a bit below the belt, right? That's a bit of an exaggeration, isn't it, Rafizi?
I think as an insult and below the belt for us Malaysians, but I think quite aptly for Najib, considering that Malaysia is a lot more mainstream as far as nations are concerned. But I think what the public is even more angry over the last 1 year is that that kind of labeling and what the rest of the world think about Malaysia have begun to really have an impact economically to us. People talk about pride, people talk about we are the laughing stock of the world, And the more and more confirmations or indictments coming from any jurisdictions in the world will further strengthen the anger and which I hope possibly will translate into public outlash in the next general election. So I think Najib will pay for it dearly in the next general election.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Let me ask you about this, Mukhris, because on the one hand, okay, as an opposition politician, this is a good opportunity when the ruling party is corrupt. Undoubtedly, there's an opportunity to get yourself into office and to point this out, right? So perhaps there's some glee amongst some opposition politicians. But on the other hand, as Rafizi says, when it comes to Malaysia's standing in the world, do you find it embarrassing as a Malaysian that all of this is out in the open and that they might be, and again, these are all allegations, there might be massive corruption to the tune of billions of dollars using your taxpayer money?
Well, first of all, I need to clarify that I came from the government. I was first a member of parliament and then a state assemblyman representing the ruling party. It was due to my criticism of the leadership, particularly Najib, was the reason why I was expelled from the party together with the Deputy Prime Minister, who is also the president of my party. And it was not at all intentional that we ended up forming a new party, be part of the opposition coalition to try and overthrow the Barisan Nasional government. You know, it was due to our criticisms internally. And sure, we would like to form a new government that has to be absolutely clean of any form of corruption. And I think this is the aspiration of every single Malaysian that will be going out to vote in GE14.
It's been a pleasure having you all on the Newsmakers. Thank you very much for joining us.